The Golden Age of China, a restful bedtime journey. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the world slow down. You've just entered a realm where stories drift like soft whispers in the night, guiding you into peaceful dreams. The Scholar and the Moonlit Lake. The night was cool, draped in the silk of a quiet autumn breeze. The moon hung full and pale over the still waters of the lake, its reflection rippling softly as a lone scholar walked along the narrow stone path. Li Wei's steps were slow, measured, the weight of his thoughts pressing down like ink upon rice paper. His mind, burdened by unanswered questions, felt adrift, lost in a sea of philosophy and study. A distant flute note lingered in the air, carried by the wind like a whisper from an unseen world. The scent of damp earth and lotus blossoms curled around him as he approached the water's edge. He paused, gazing at the shimmering reflection of the moon, fractured by the gentle ripples. A sigh left his lips. Troubled, young scholar? A voice, aged yet steady, floated toward him. Li Wei turned to see an old fisherman, sitting by his small wooden boat, his lantern casting a warm, flickering glow upon the shore. His robes were simple, his hands worn from years of casting nets into the lake's embrace. He moved with an ease that spoke of deep familiarity with the night. "I have spent years searching for wisdom," Li Wei admitted. "Yet, the more I seek it, the farther it drifts from my grasp." The fisherman chuckled, his eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. "The moon upon the water, young man. What do you see?" Li Wei frowned, turning his gaze back to the lake. "The moon's reflection," he said slowly. "Try to catch it," the fisherman said, lifting his oar and stirring the water. The reflection broke apart, shattering into ripples that spread outward into the darkness. "No matter how you reach, the moon slips away," the old man continued, his voice calm. "But when the water is still, it returns." Li Wei stood silent, the fisherman's words settling into his mind like falling leaves upon a pond. He had chased knowledge, grasping at answers like a man trying to hold water in his palms. But perhaps wisdom, like the moon's reflection, could only be seen when the mind was at peace. The flute's melody drifted once more, mingling with the soft lapping of the water. The old fisherman smiled and pushed his boat into the lake, vanishing into the mist. Li Wei remained by the shore, watching the moon reassemble itself upon the water's surface. And for the first time in years, he simply stood still. The bamboo grove in the whispering winds. The golden glow of dusk filtered through the swaying canopy of bamboo, casting long, delicate shadows across the moss-covered stones. Minglan sat alone on a smooth rock, her brush hovering above a blank parchment. The ink in her porcelain dish had cooled, untouched for too long. A sigh escaped her lips, dissolving into the rustling melody of the grove. She had wandered deep into the bamboo forest, seeking solitude, seeking inspiration. But the words would not come. The poems that once flowed so easily from her heart now felt distant, elusive as mist on the mountains. The wind stirred again, slipping through the tall green stalks, setting them to swaying in a rhythm older than time. Minglan closed her eyes and listened. The whispers of the leaves, the soft hush of the earth beneath her, the gentle creak of bending bamboo, it felt as if the grove itself was speaking. "What are you listening for, child?" The voice was soft yet steady, like river stones smoothed by years of flowing water. Minglan turned and saw an old monk standing at the edge of the grove, his robes of faded saffron, his hands folded neatly before him. His face bore the quiet serenity of one who had long since stopped chasing the world. "I am listening for words," she admitted. "But they will not come." The monk stepped closer, his sandals barely disturbing the fallen leaves. The wind speaks, but it does not command. The bamboo bends, but it does not seek. He gestured to the towering stalks swaying above them. Do you see how they move with the wind? Minglan nodded. Would they not break if they resisted? She watched as the wind danced through the grove, the bamboo swaying effortlessly, never fighting, never rigid. Inspiration is not something to chase, the monk said, lowering himself onto a nearby rock. Like the wind, it arrives when it wills. If you quiet your mind, it will find you. Minglan stared down at her parchment, then at the ink, still dark and waiting. She dipped her brush, hesitated, then let it glide across the page. A single stroke. Then another. She did not force the words. She allowed them, like the wind through the bamboo. The monk rose with a knowing smile and continued his path through the grove. The temple bells rang faintly in the distance, their echoes mingling with the rustling leaves. And in the hush of the twilight wind, Minglan's poem was born. The Jade River's Secret. The Jade River wound through the valley like a silver ribbon, its waters flowing smooth and endless beneath the moon's soft gaze. Along its moss-lined banks, she knelt beside a weary traveler, pressing a cool cloth to the man's fevered brow. The young healer had spent years tending to those who passed through, offering teas brewed from wild herbs and salves mixed with careful hands. But tonight, the weight of exhaustion pressed upon him like the mist that clung to the river's edge. A faint rustling in the reeds drew Shin's attention. Turning, he saw an old woman emerging from the shadows, her robes a deep shade of twilight, her hair long as silver threads woven by time. She carried no staff, yet her steps were sure, her presence as fluid as the river itself. You are weary, healer, she murmured, her voice like the hush of the evening tide. Shin dipped his head respectfully. There is much work to do. Many suffer. The old woman studied him for a moment before kneeling by the river's edge. With slow, deliberate movements, she cupped her hands, lifting a pool of moonlit water before letting it slip through her fingers. Do you know the secret of this river? She asked. Shin frowned, watching as the ripples faded into stillness. The Jade River is said to hold a hidden spring, she continued. A place where the water is so pure, so quiet, that it carries the essence of tranquility itself. She opened her palm, revealing a single pearl, smooth, luminous, flawless. But such peace cannot be grasped, only found. Shin reached out, but before his fingers could touch the pearl, a gust of wind sent ripples across the water. The old woman was gone, vanishing like mist dissolving into the night. The next morning, guided only by the whisper of her words, Shin followed the river upstream. The path was slow, winding through groves of willow trees and fields of swaying reeds. At last, he arrived at a secluded cove where the water lay untouched, a mirror reflecting the vast sky above. Kneeling at the edge, Shin stilled his breath, gazing into the crystalline depths. The surface was unbroken, serene. And in that moment, he understood, the secret of the river was not in the water itself, but in the stillness it taught. For the first time in years, Shin closed his eyes, allowing silence to settle over him like morning dew. And when he rose, he carried not just the knowledge of healing, but the wisdom of the river itself. The Emperor's Garden of Eternal Peace. The garden lay hidden within the vast imperial palace, cradled between ancient stone walls and veiled by the hush of night. Here, time moved differently. The lantern-lit pathways wound through groves of flowering plum trees, their petals drifting like whispers onto the mossy ground. A small waterfall tumbled over smooth jade rocks, its voice soft, eternal. Within this sanctuary, the gardener knelt. His hands, rough from years of tending the earth, pressed gently into the soil as he patted down the roots of a young magnolia. He worked without urgency, for the garden did not demand haste, only patience. A quiet shuffle of silk upon stone broke the night's stillness. The gardener did not turn. He knew who had come. The Emperor stepped forward, his golden robes trailing behind him, the weight of the world etched into his brow. His face, usually unreadable, was drawn in quiet turmoil. Matters of the court, of war, of endless decisions clung to him like unseen chains. The gardener did not speak. Instead, he rose and walked toward the moonlit path, his posture an unspoken invitation. The emperor followed. They moved in silence, past the weeping willows whose branches swayed with the breeze, past the lotus pond where koi glided beneath the silver reflection of the moon. The soft crunch of their footsteps upon the stone path became a rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. The emperor inhaled deeply. The air carried the fragrance of jasmine, delicate and pure. Somewhere in the distance, a cricket sang, its song a single note in the symphony of the night. By the waterfall, the gardener finally stopped. He gestured, not to the water, nor to the trees, but to the space between them. To the hush that lived there. The emperor listened. The world beyond the palace walls, of politics, of power, of endless voices, seemed distant now, like waves retreating from the shore. He closed his eyes, allowing the cool mist from the waterfall to touch his skin. The rhythm of nature was unbroken, undemanding. The gardener bowed and stepped away, returning to his work. The emperor lingered, watching the moon's reflection ripple upon the water's surface. Here, in this garden untouched by time, he found something rare, something no throne, no decree, no conquest could grant him. Peace. The lantern maker's dream. The soft glow of candlelight flickered against the wooden walls of Bao's humble shop. Rows of delicate lanterns, some round as the moon, others shaped like blooming lotuses, hung from the ceiling, their silk skins painted with careful strokes of birds, mountains, and winding rivers. Each one, a world of its own, waiting to take flight into the night. Bao, his hands aged but steady, sat at his low wooden table, threading a thin wire through the frame of a lantern. The scent of ink and rice glue mingled with the faint sweetness of dried osmanthus petals that he kept in a small dish beside him. Outside, the distant hum of festival drums echoed through the streets. Laughter wove through the evening air like drifting smoke, carried by the autumn breeze. But Bao did not join the festivities. Not yet. He ran his fingers gently over the silk of an unfinished lantern. This one was special. Unlike the others, it bore no painting, no words, only emptiness, waiting. His eyelids grew heavy. The candle beside him burned low. And as he leaned back against his chair, his breath slowing, sleep took him. The dream. Bao opened his eyes to find himself standing beneath an endless sky, dark as ink yet shimmering with golden light. Lanterns, thousands of them, drifted upward like fireflies, their glow painting the heavens with a warm, living pulse. He looked closer. These were not ordinary lanterns. Each one carried a whisper, a wish, a memory. Some bore names written in calligraphy, others had gentle brushstrokes of cherry blossoms and waves. They floated past him like fallen leaves carried by the river of the wind. Then, among them, Bao saw faces, smiling, serene, familiar. His mother's gentle eyes. His father's quiet nod. The laughter of old friends, their voices distant yet clear. A lantern passed before him, its silk shimmering like water. When he reached out, he felt its warmth, not from the candle within, but from something deeper. Comfort. Connection. A message of peace from those who had come before, their light still guiding the living. As Bao watched, the lanterns continued to rise, higher and higher, until they became stars in the vast expanse above. Awakening. A sudden gust of wind stirred the lantern shop, rustling the silk and paper around him. Bao's eyes fluttered open. The candle beside him had nearly burned out, its wax pooled like melted gold. For a long moment, he sat in silence, feeling the echo of his dream in his heart. Then, with a newfound clarity, he reached for his brush. On the blank lantern before him, he painted a single thing, not mountains, not birds, not flowers. But a soft, glowing light, floating upward, toward the stars. And as he carried it outside to join the others, he knew, his lanterns were not just objects of beauty. They were messengers of memory, bearers of warmth, and keepers of dreams. And tonight, as the festival came to life, their light would bring comfort to all who gazed upon them. As you take in this moment of peace and relaxation, we invite you to support this journey by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps bring more soothing stories and tranquil moments to life. Thank you for being here. May your nights be restful and your dreams peaceful.